This is TechCrunch.
New York Governor Kathy Hochul plans to introduce legislation that would effectively legalize robotaxis in the state, except for its most populous metropolis, New York City. Hochul, who made the comments Tuesday during her State of the State address, said the legislation would advance the next phase of the state's autonomous vehicle pilot program. Details on the proposed legislation and when it might be released are thin. However, there are some hints contained within a document that outlines an array of proposals and promises Hochul made in her State of the State address. Among them is language to expand the state's existing AV pilot program to allow for the limited deployment of commercial for-hire autonomous passenger vehicles outside New York City. The document goes on to say companies that want to operate robotaxi services commercially will have to submit applications that demonstrate local support for AV deployment and adherence to the highest possible safety standards. It's not clear what limited deployment or highest possible safety standards mean. Nor does the document outline how the state will track or make judgments on a company's safety record, except that multiple agencies will be involved, including the Department of Motor Vehicles, Department of Transportation, and New York State Police. The governor's office told TechCrunch more will be shared in the governor's executive budget proposal that is set to be released on January 20th. Still, the remarks were enough of an opening to make Alphabet-owned Waymo cheer. Justin Kintz, Waymo's head of global public policy, said, Governor Hochul's proposal to legalize fully autonomous vehicles is a transformative moment for New York's transportation system. With the governor's leadership, New York has the opportunity to pair its investments in slower speeds, better traffic enforcement, and first-in-the-nation congestion management strategies with Waymo's demonstrably safe technology, creating a future where living in New York is safer, easier, and more accessible. We're ready to work with leaders around the state to make this future a reality and bring new infrastructure, career opportunities, and investment to the Empire State. Waymo and other companies have tried for years to enter New York State with limited success. Current New York State law mandates that drivers keep one hand on the wheel at all times. That poses a problem for robotaxi operators like Waymo since no human is behind the wheel, if there is a steering wheel at all. The state's AV pilot program has provided an exemption to that rule, theoretically allowing companies to develop and test autonomous vehicles in the state. Still, there are significant hurdles, particularly in New York City. Last August, city regulators granted a permit to Waymo to test its robotaxis in the densely populated city. Under that permit, Waymo can deploy up to 8 of its Jaguar I-Pace vehicles in Manhattan and downtown Brooklyn with a human safety operator behind the wheel. A Waymo spokesperson told TechCrunch that the permit has been extended until March 31st. Even with the permit, Waymo can't carry passengers or operate a commercial robotaxi service without getting separate licenses from the city's Taxi and Limousine Commission. And while legislation was introduced last year to create a framework for driverless operation, it has languished in the state Senate's Transportation Committee. The governor's proposal could help loosen that bottleneck. Although public backlash against data centers has been intense over the past 12 months, all of the tech industry's biggest companies have promised additional build-outs of AI infrastructure in the coming year. That includes OpenAI partner Microsoft, which, on Tuesday, announced what it calls a community-first approach to AI infrastructure. Microsoft's announcement, which comes only a day after Mark Zuckerberg said that Meta would launch its own AI infrastructure program, isn't unexpected. Last year, the company announced that it planned to spend billions to expand its AI capacity. What is a little unusual are the promises the company has now made about how it will handle that build-out. On Tuesday, Microsoft promised to take the steps needed to be a good neighbor in the communities where we build, own, and operate our data centers. That includes, according to the company, its plans to pay its own way to ensure that local electricity bills don't go through the roof in the places where it builds. Specifically, the company says it will work with local utility companies to ensure that the rates it pays cover its full share of its burden on the local grid. Microsoft said, "We will work closely with utility companies that set electricity prices and state commissions that approve these prices. Our goal is straightforward: to ensure that the electricity cost of serving our data centers is not passed on to residential customers. The company has also promised to create jobs in the communities where it touches down, as well as to minimize the amount of water that its centers need to function. Water usage by data centers has obviously been a contentious topic, with data centers accused of creating substantial issues for local water supplies and spurring other environmental concerns. The jobs promise is also relevant, given lingering questions around the number of both short-term and permanent jobs that such projects typically create. It's pretty clear why Microsoft feels it is necessary to make these promises right now. Data center construction has become a political flashpoint in recent years, generating intense backlash and protest from local communities. Data Center Watch, an organization that tracks anti-data center activism, has observed that there are as many as 142 different activist groups across 24 states currently organizing against such developments. This backlash has already impacted Microsoft directly. In October, the company abandoned plans for a new data center in Caledonia, Wisconsin, after community feedback was overwhelmingly negative. In Michigan, meanwhile, the company's plans for a similar project in a small central township have recently inspired locals to take to the streets and protest. On Tuesday, around the same time Microsoft announced its Good Neighbor Pledge, an op-ed in an Ohio newspaper, where Microsoft is currently developing several data center campuses, excoriated the company, blaming it and its peers for climate change. Concerns have extended even to the White House, where an AI build-out has become one of the major tenets of the Trump administration. On Monday, President Trump took to social media to promise that Microsoft specifically would make major changes to ensure that Americans' electricity bills wouldn't rise. Trump said the changes would ensure that Americans don't pick up the tab for their power consumption. In short, by now, Microsoft understands that it's fighting a tide of negative public opinion. It remains to be seen whether the company's new assurances of jobs, environmental stewardship, and low electricity bills will be enough to turn the tide. That's it from TechCrunch. For more stories like these, go to TechCrunch.com.